All right, Buff fans, welcome to another BuffZone video. Please be joined by Matt Smith of 104.3 The Fan. And Matt, you've been covering the Buffs for a long time, along with me. We used to cover men's basketball together back in the day, in the early days of the Pac-12, and so you've been around a long time, and you've been around, quite a bit, during football as well, and certainly during Coach Prime era. So we've been around every day. So how you doing? First
Yeah.
off.
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. Just excited to be back in football season. Number one, it means that the action is back. It was for us down in Bronco land. It's a lot of speculation and what's the first round quarterback going to look like. So
Yeah,
I'm very glad to have some different storylines to talk about as well. And quite frankly, this is something that, and I know there's a lot of cross pollination of Broncos fans and Buff fans. But quite frankly, the storylines surrounding the Buffs are just far more interesting in almost every regard. So, there's part of me that's like, oh yeah, let's talk about the battle of a backup, defensive end, third team on a 5-win football team like that. Well, we might have to do that anyway with this one, but
yeah,
hopefully it's a better season than that.
right.
The point is that I think it's far more interesting, and this is what it's all been. We've all been waiting for this moment, right? I mean, here we go with year 2 of Coach Prime and Shadur's senior year. So this is the most excited I've been for a CU football season. I don't know. I mean, 2016, no one had those expectations. I
Yeah.
remember the first time Mike McIntyre was sitting in that room and told us that their expectations were Pac-12 champs, and we all kind of gave it the old eye roll, kind of snicker, look, back and forth, and but then they just kept winning.
Yeah.
So that was a really fun organic dynamic. But the expectations this year, in part because of the ones that Dion has said himself, they're very high,
Yeah.
especially nationally. And I think
Mhm.
for Buffs fans, they have one view of it. And I'm in this really unique place that because I'm as close to the program as I am, right, I get the local view of it. And I
Yeah.
understand where CU in this program has been. But I also have the radio station and the national side of it to deal with, where the expectations are very high, and they're kind of lines in the sand being drawn already for a team that 2 years ago won one game and got lucky to do so.
Yeah.
So it's a fun dynamic I get to see. I get to see both sides of the narratives and all the reaction. And look, like I said, either way, whether it's a great season or a bad season, sometimes in this business we call it a beautiful disaster, and God forbid. I mean, we've had way too many of those around Boulder for way too long. But I mean, if it doesn't go right this year, it's not going to be pretty. So
Yeah.
I think the excitement, one way or another, it's such a compelling storyline altogether.
Yeah. I will say, when you talk about the eye rolls in 2016, part of that is because every year before and every year since, every team talks about, oh, we're going to win the conference, and so they always come in with those expectations. And 2017, I would even say there was some excitement because you had Steven Montez coming back. People were excited about what he had done in a couple of his games, but you lost a lot of that team, so you didn't have quite the expectations. The Laviska Chenault years, maybe there was some of that, especially that 5-0 start in 2018, I think it was. You're like, okay, wow, this team is something. Then they lose 7 in a row. But but you're right. It's been a while since we've really had a chance to get excited about this team. And I think last year was excitement in a lot of ways because the novelty of it, right?
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but like, and I was labeled a hater for this, but I was not excited about the team last year because I thought they were going to be really good. It was like I didn't think they would be that great. I thought I was more excited because of the novelty of it, and like this is gonna be fun. I mean, this is a really good quarterback. You got Travis Hunter, all this stuff, and I thought that they might be a bowl team, but I had question marks, and it turns out there were plenty of question marks. So, but this year there's still question marks, Matt. But I think that there's more excitement for me about what this team can do because you've got Shadur in the second year, and like he told me at Big 12 Media Day in Vegas last month, he's like, look, now I know the lay of the land, and it was kind of that admittance of like, hey, I know what it's like, at this level now, and and he can adjust, and so he knows what that's like, and they not just him, but like they all downplayed that a little bit last year, and I think there's something to it, and and again, people would label us haters, but like it's because we've seen it. Like we've seen JUCO kids come in and need that second year before they're really acclimated. We've seen guys that came in that weren't starters at their previous school, that they weren't even that good right away with Colorado and they needed some time. And so we'd seen it before. And so when you got a team full of that like last year, that's why I was like, but this year, Matt, and I'm talking too long right now, but like, what to me, what's different, and you can debate me on this or not, but to me, what's different is that the type of player they brought in. Last year, it was FCS guys and Power Five backups. This year, it's like guys that started at the FBS level, right? Across, not even just the offensive line, but like across the board, right? You've got guys that have, I mean, you got the top receiver at Vanderbilt. You got the number 2 receiver in the country as far as receptions last year, LeJontay Wester. You got, 7 or 8 offensive linemen that were starters last year at the FBS level. You have linebackers that were starters. You have corners that were starters. So to me, the quality is different.
Oh, it's completely different. And to your point, it's a very interesting dynamic we have to experience covering CU because the way that some of the things are manipulated, you're either with it or against it. And in
Yeah.
reality, it's not our job to be either.
Right.
We're objective,
Yeah.
right? And obviously that you and I are close enough to the program where it is no big shock to say that we hope they do well. But at the same time, you and I are also two people that would not let that affect your reporting one way or another. That I
Right.
know for sure. And
Mhm.
so when you say you weren't surprised about anything that happened last year, neither was I. In
Yeah.
fact, I'll give you a perfect example. I remember we were doing a broadcast down at Broncos training camp last year, and one of our promotions guys who sets up the tent and does some of these other things, he comes up to me and he's all excited about CU. He said, 9 wins, 9 wins. And I'm sitting there with Chad Brown, obviously,
Mhm.
legendary Buff.
Yeah.
And Chad and I are just kind of like, okay, and we were like, 4-5. And he was
Yeah.
like, no way, no way. They start 3-0. He starts, DMing me. I told you. And I said, just, hold on.
Mhm.
It's coming. And that's what
Yeah.
happens. It's big boy football. Excuse me. And you're right. They downplayed it. They
Yeah.
did. They didn't want to acknowledge it publicly. And one of my bigger concerns when Shador came in, because I'd seen it on film, was he was able to get away with a lot of stuff at that level as far as like holding onto the ball and trying to extend the play when at this level that guy closed the gap on you instantly. You didn't
Right.
step out of that sack. And it's exactly what ended up transpiring last year. So there
Yeah.
was an acclimation period, but there would be for anybody who comes up from that level. So again, none of it surprised me. It was, I think, a little bit disappointing because they should have been a bowl team last year.
Oh
They
yeah.
had
Yeah.
some of those games, and I felt like, on the wrong side of a couple of decisions or a bad break here or there. And I think it was 2 and 5 in one score games. You can double check me on that one. But that's typically what NFL and college football, for the most part, comes down to when you have two good teams, a
Yeah.
one score game who can execute. And that's going to be the rhyme and rhythm to this season. And that at the end of the day will be the determining factor. How do you execute when the game gets close? Do, do you have the recognition to do things differently after being up 29 at halftime, 29-0
Yeah.
on Stanford, right? Like, do you try to, and I believe it's a 3rd and 1 against Arizona. They're going in, they've got the lead, they're going to add on to the lead. And 3rd and 1, you throw the ball twice because
Yeah.
you felt like you couldn't get a yard. It's those subtle differences that will take this team from a team that disappointed even despite having such an incredible improvement year over year. But those are the difference between having that team and then having a team at the end of the year where you and I are in San Antonio covering another Alamo Bowl,
Yeah.
around Christmas. So we'll see how it plays out. But yeah, I would agree with you that I get a different vibe significantly. And we went through this on air the other day, and I'm glad you brought up the Shador said, I got the lay of the land now, so don't worry. We
Yeah.
had a little fun with that on my radio show because for Buff fan, don't tell a Buff fan not to worry. I mean, the Buff
Yeah.
fan hadn't seen success in a long. Buff fan by nature is gonna be worried, but
Yeah.
we were just having a little fun with it. But it's true. Like he's
Yeah.
seen it. Now he understands, okay, maybe I was a little too it was a bit, a little high on my britches last year. I kind of got knocked down a peg,
Yeah.
So after you take 50 plus sacks, you start to learn some of those lessons. And
Mhm.
so we'll see how it translates this year. But with you brought it up, there is no position that you can actually make the argument they got worse. I
Yeah.
really can't think of one.
Right.
And that is an amazing place to start. The other part of it is that's 46 new transfers. And I think it's at least 6 new members of the coaching staff, of the primary coaching staff, not
Yeah.
assistants and such. So, can you microwave all that chemistry again? Two things come to mind real quick. Pat Shermer brought up with us in the spring that at the beginning of fall in year 1 for Prime, it felt like putting together an all-star team.
Yeah.
Does it feel like that again? And I think there's probably a little bit more chemistry because there is more continuity with the guys who have stayed over. However, that's a question mark still. And then, do you shake last year? Something that Robert Livingston said to us this week that definitely caught my ear. was, well, I can still see last year in some of these guys' eyes.
Yeah.
And I go, oh, okay. I was wondering if that would hang around because it did not finish pretty.
Yeah.
And there's a reason why there's some people that do not believe in what's going on here whatsoever. They lost 8 of 9 and 7
Yeah.
in a row. It
Yeah.
was really bad down the stretch. And if the team that showed up at the end of the year showed up at the beginning of this season, I would understand why some people wouldn't believe in it. But we both know, and so does the listener, that this
Yeah.
isn't the same team. So
Right.
I thought it was interesting because psychologically, what effect does that have? Because remember now, those first 3 games last year, they were emotional. And I
Mhm.
don't think anybody I'll say this and I'll let you and I'll give it back to you. But after TCU, after they beat TCU, we're standing down there in the annals of whatever they call the stadium down there in Fort Worth, and we're in the back hallway. And I see this collection of national college football writers. I'd never seen that. I mean, I've covered CU for over 10 years, just the same as you.
Right.
I'd
Mhm.
never seen anything like that. And I went, oh, wow. Like, I knew it was going to be big if he had success. I didn't know what it was going to be because I don't think you could have. The
Yeah.
truth is, Brian, they carried nationally sports, not just
Yeah.
college football, not just football,
Right.
nationally. And it
Right.
became a crossover into more of like a phenomenon. And that's when you have real staying power. So they got an opportunity here early. But I'll just say, like, can you prepare yourself for the emotions of these first 3 weeks? Because these are going to be another emotional first 3 weeks. And then can you sustain? Obviously we're getting ahead of
Yeah.
ourselves, but those are my general thoughts so far.
Yeah, and real quick, I want to go back to what Shador said because I do want to point out that Shador knew that the difference was going to be the defensive line and them closing because we talked about that at Pac-12 Media Day in Las Vegas a year ago. I talked about that with him and also Cam Ward at Washington State who had experienced it the year before. So he knew that. I think that it was just more of like when you experience it, it's like, oh, okay, it's very
100%.
different. And I
Yeah,
think it's also that lay of the land. Also, I think when he says that to me, it's also like I understand my team a little bit better now too, and
sure.
not just himself that he wasn't not necessarily saying he wasn't ready. I think it's more so handling his team in a different setting, and so I think there's that. But
The one thing, and I think you're right, that he was aware of it, but
yeah,
saying it is different than knowing it because it took him until the USC game to throw a ball away for the first time it was week
right,
6 before he
right,
threw a pass away. So agreed 100%. Maybe something you're aware of and you say to sound like it, but I'll be okay. I mean,
yeah,
look at how much they won. I mean, I
yeah,
wouldn't be surprised if he thought he was going to be able to get away with some of it too. So look, I mean,
yeah.
learning lessons for everybody.
But you experience it, and then it's different. And going back to what you said, like you said, hey, there's maybe not a position that you can say they got worse. I would argue this. I don't think there's a position, maybe other than running back. Running back's the
I
only
was
position I
just about to say,
running back's the only position I look at that say I don't know if they're better. Like I think every other position, I think they're better. Running back, I don't think they're worse, but I don't know if they're better. The only reason is that I liked last year's group. We just didn't get to see them. I think I like this year's group, but we haven't seen them yet. Because that's the one spot that I say I don't know if they improved there, but
I'm
that's
glad you brought it
okay.
up. Yeah. Yes, it is for the context of what they're doing.
Right.
Um, I'm glad you brought that up. I've been watching the Well Off Media videos, and here's what I'll say. This is part of the reason why I wish we had more access because you can't judge anything based off those videos. A highlight's nice.
Yeah.
It's good to see when guys make plays, but you
Yeah.
have no idea what a full scope of a practice looks like. So,
Right.
sure, yeah, is a guy making plays? Great. Well, does he have the drops and some of the stuff that gets cut? I don't know.
Yeah.
So, it's kind of hard for me to say one way or another.
I will say,
But
let me
yeah, go
interrupt you
ahead.
real
Yeah.
quick. The one thing you can get out of those is you see who's making plays. And sometimes if you don't see someone show up ever, okay, they're not making plays.
Well, I had that thought about Dallin Hayden. If I'm being perfectly honest with you, and we're just
Yeah.
putting all of our cards on the table, Charlie Offerdahl, we were told this week, is getting first team reps.
Yeah.
And at first, it's like, okay, yeah, he's the most senior guy here. I mean, first of all, he's the only guy left
Yeah.
over in that room from last year.
Right.
So it makes sense. And whenever he's been healthy, coaches have loved him. So I get it. But, he was a former walk on put on scholarship. I think we're going to need to see some of that materialize on the field to really establish the legitimacy of the believability factor of it. If I'm just being, perfectly frank with you, which is why I think a lot of fans were like, oh, Dallin Hayden from Ohio State, Isaiah Augusta from Arkansas, here's Micah Welch. Well, I've seen like deficiencies in some of these guys' game. Like Mike is going to struggle in pass protection in a real
Yeah.
way until he can figure that out, unfortunately. At least is what it looks like to me based upon the limited amount that I get a chance to see. Also like it's a little unfair to criticize a guy because I can't see the rest of it. So maybe he had
Right.
other good reps. But I haven't seen one big play from Dallin Hayden. Now, I kind of think back to last year where Dylan Edwards was busting a different touchdown every week or every day for that matter. That's why they called him every day.
Yeah.
And well, the defense this year, I'll tell you, the one thing I can tell you from watching these videos, I think that they're going to surprise some people with how much better they are up front.
Yeah.
And I was one of them who, and raising my hand, who did not anticipate them to make that kind of a jump. I think they're going to get pushed defensively, Brian. I do. So is it a situation where the running backs aren't performing, or pads haven't been on long enough, or it's a new scheme, or they're not showing it? I don't know.
Yeah.
But I'm glad you brought up running back because I texted a friend. I did. And I go, out of all the guys that they've lost over the last 2 years, I'm gonna wonder about Alton McCaskill. I'm
Yeah.
just gonna. And I don't know what it was like behind the scenes. And is he gonna play in front of Scatabo down there for ASU? I don't know.
Yeah.
Gosh, it's in the back of my mind. I'm gonna go, that's a guy who could have been an all-around back. And quite frankly, I don't know that they have one of those guys yet. So I'm hoping that we just haven't seen it.
Well, but and part you made a good point is that if he's not that at Arizona State, then maybe you don't wonder as much, you
Right.
know. But if he is that guy
100%.
at Arizona State, you're like, dude, what'd you guys miss?
Yeah,
And
and
so
again, I don't really have any of those thoughts about anybody else who's left. Like Dylan Edwards,
yeah,
I think they'll be fine. Like, I mean, he was a
yeah,
good player and had one really good game, but I
yeah.
think they'll be able to survive that. But it's just that, man, the promise of what he could have been will always ring in my head
Well,
until it's proven untrue.
right. And I think Dylan Edwards is going to be great in the role that Kansas State's going to play him in,
Yeah.
because he's not the lead guy, because they got to start running back and they can do some different things with him. Kansas State writer told me, he goes, I hate to put these names on him, but he's basically like Darren Sproles or Deuce Vaughn that's been at K-State. He goes, he's in that mold and he can thrive in that. He just wasn't great in the role they put him in last year. He was the starting running back, and he was not ready for that as a true freshman. So yes, I agree with you. Alton McCaskill is probably the one guy out of the room that I'm like,
I just think
man,
about, I just think about it.
but at the same time, it's been 2.5, 3 years since he did that. And so I am excited, even though we haven't seen him a lot. The pads haven't been on much either. I got some excitement over Dallin Hayden and Isaiah Agasave and Brandon Hood and Michael Welch. I think it's a good group. When I say I don't think that they're better, I just don't know. I just don't think they're worse.
I definitely caught my eye. That's all
Yeah.
I'll say. And
Yeah.
in this business, to me, especially in camp, eye test is big.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna give them a benefit of the doubt because again, I feel like it's unfair to make a lot of those statements because we just can't see. But if that's what
Yeah.
you're gonna give us, then that's what we have to go off of. So
Yeah.
kind of a give and take there. Although again, to your point, I don't want to make it sound like, oh, he's not going to do anything, or you got to be careful with some of the way that things are taken. Not what I'm saying. It's just, oh, I thought we might have seen X, Y, or Z, and we just haven't. Well, maybe it's early. Like I said, pads just came on, and with the running game, it typically takes a little while. Not to mention you're breaking in 5 new linemen and a new scheme. So maybe that happens. I'm still very excited on the potential of what could happen. I'll say this: I don't think they downgraded. I
Right.
mean, I don't think they downgraded from last
Exactly.
year. So at worst, it's negligible difference between the talent in that room previously. But at receiver, I don't think people around the country understand how good this receiving corps could
Yeah.
be.
Well,
I was looking at that video where you
yeah.
got Travis, LeJonte, Shepard, and Jimmy, and I'm going, oh my God. Like, who's
Yeah.
going to be able to defend that? I don't know.
Yeah.
You're going to have to get to Shador. You're
Right.
going to have to, because if you sit in man, he'll just pick you apart this year. They're going to be much better. Shepard
Yeah.
looks like Cortland Sutton Jr. to me in some of
Yeah.
those clips.
Right.
And LeJonte could catch another 70 balls or something like that. So
Yeah.
I'm excited about the prospects of their offense.
Yeah, I am too. And one other thing about the well-off stuff is that I will say this, that they're showing the big plays, right? So what we don't know, to your point, is like we don't get to see practice. Maybe Dallin Hayden's consistently ripping off 7-8 yard runs,
Yes.
which would be fantastic. But
How
they're
about
not.
average 4 yards a carry? We'll be all Gucci. I'll take
But
it.
but if he's getting 7-8 yard runs routinely and then popping off a 15 yarder every now and then, that's not great video for highlights.
It's not
But that's
sexy on YouTube. Yeah.
But that's exactly what you want your running back to do, right? And
Right.
so I'll take it. So
Yeah.
so
I'm
yeah,
hoping. I'm
yeah,
hoping.
I'm hoping. And the other thing, you mentioned the defense. I agree with you. I think they might surprise people with the improvement they make on that side of the ball. They gave up 35 points a game basically last year. If they can cut that down to 28, I think this team is going to be really good. And that's a touchdown difference at 28 is not great, but if they can cut a touchdown off of that, I think this defense or this team is going to be pretty good.
Yes. A lot of it comes up front and stopping the run. Way too
Yes.
many chunk plays last year. I'll tell you, and I brought this up on my show this morning. BJ Green and Deion Hayes off the edge. I don't think CU's had a combo of pass
Right.
rushers like that. 2016's team didn't. They
Right.
had one, that 2016 team. They had Jimmy
Yeah.
Gilbert.
Yeah.
They didn't have these guys like this. And
Yeah.
BJ Green, I mean, oof, he's an NFLer. That
Right.
kid's a stud.
Yep.
And, voted all preseason all Big 12 for a reason. Deion Hayes looks exciting. And not to mention, and here's the other wrinkle I want to bring up, because I think it kind of goes under the radar, but Shane Koch stayed.
Yeah.
Shane Koch could have left. He would have been in an NFL camp at some point. I promise you,
Yeah.
he's an NFL prospect. He got double teamed almost every single play last year because the opposing offensive line didn't have to worry about anything. If Amari McNeil looks solid, he looks like he's stronger. He was really coming on strong at the back half of last year. You got those two guys with Green and Hayes on the edge just to start before you get to Okunlola and Taurine Carter and saying, some of these other guys in Barnes, some of these other guys they've added.
Yeah.
It's the best front seven CU's had, at least on paper, in a long time, Brian.
Yeah. Best and deepest.
By far. Yeah.
Yeah. So I agree with you, because I thought there's times you can look at and say, man, their starting unit's pretty good, but you get past the top three and it's like,
right.
But
but now there's quality depth. To your point,
right.
They brought in guys that have actually had productive snaps in other places at big schools, whereas they weren't just kind of picking their butt on the sideline last year with the caliber of guys.
Right.
Not to be so frank about it, but that's kind of the truth here and the difference. So I'm excited.
Well, you're bringing in BJ Green, who was all conference last year, Pac-12.
Right.
Deion Hayes,
Preston Hodge.
Right.
Preston Hodge looks good too.
Right. Preston Hodge. Deion Hayes was one of the leading pass rushers at Pitt. Preston Hodge was a starting corner on a 13-0 team. I don't count the bowl game for him because he left before then.
PFF had him ranked over a 90 grade last year, which is unheard of for a college corner. I am
right.
And from the clips, I'll say, I don't know what we can judge. Maybe he's getting burned in other clips, but from the clips they've shown, he's going to make plays. And I get why they can play Travis inside now. I get that.
And DJ McKinney was, he was not a starter, but played starter minutes, to use a basketball term, at Oklahoma State, and they regret losing him. That's one guy that, talking to an Oklahoma State writer, she was like, man, that's one guy that we were like, man, we hate missing him. But Matt, we're going to get more into this as camp goes along. We're going to get out of here today and kind of wrap this up. But those are our initial thoughts. 1 week in and not being able to watch practice, but being able to watch well off, and we'll catch up at some point soon, because we want to talk about media day that's coming up this Friday and things like that. But and we'll do this throughout the season. We haven't done this a lot before, but we're going to start doing this more. So Matt, thanks for joining me, and I'll see you out at the practice fields this week.
I'll see you there. Make sure you got your stopwatch.